This program is rated PG. It contains themes and scenes which may not be suitable for very young audiences. Parental guidance is advised.
Working to connect a region of over 600 million bridges between our lands.
Welcome to ASEAN in Focus. I'm Alma Angeles, and we're coming to you live from Manila and Cambodia. Hello, Crystal.
Hello, Alma. I'm Crystal Ann Ballesteros, bringing you the news in the dynamic ASEAN region.
On today's headlines. Over a dozen fully vaccinated doctors have died of COVID-19 in Indonesia. According to a medical association there, as the Southeast Asian country battles a rash of severe cases in inoculated medical workers and highly infectious new virus strains.
Surrender, give up your weapons, and the government will support you. President Duterte made this offer anew to New People's Army or NPA rebels, assuring them of free housing, financial, and food assistance.
Wildlife officials carry away the carcasses of turtles washed ashore near Sri Lanka's capital, Colombo, with their deaths linked to a recent fire on board a container Singaporean ship carrying hundreds of tons of chemicals and plastics.
Cambodian authorities confiscated a pet lion after the defanged and declawed animal was seen in TikTok videos in a Phnom Penh villa.
First, over a dozen fully vaccinated doctors have died of COVID-19 in Indonesia. That is according to a medical association there, as the Southeast Asian country battles a rash of severe cases in inoculated medical workers and highly infectious new virus strains. Nearly 1,000 Indonesian health workers have died from the virus since the pandemic started, with the country's medical association confirming on Friday that all 491 doctors were among the victims, 14 of whom were fully vaccinated. The association's COVID-19 mitigation head, Mohammed Abid Kumaidi, told journalists that, quote, "We are still updating the data and confirming whether the other cases had been vaccinated or not." The rise of severe cases in inoculated medical workers has raised questions about the China-produced Sinovac jab, which Indonesia is heavily relying on to vaccinate more than 180 million people by early next year. This month, more than 300 vaccinated doctors and healthcare workers in Central Java were found to have been infected with COVID-19, with about a dozen hospitalized. The country is also grappling with new virus strains, including the highly infectious Delta variant, first identified in India. Dozens of communities in Central Java's Kudus Regency were put under lockdown after the Delta variant was detected in local testing samples, causing a sudden spike in virus cases. The surge has been partly blamed on millions traveling from that region across the Muslim-majority nation at the end of Ramadan last month, despite an official ban on the annual migration.
Still in Indonesia, set for a new record for daily coronavirus cases on Sunday, with more than 21,000 as hospitals are flooded with patients in Jakarta and other COVID-19 hotspots across Southeast Asia's hardest hit nation. The figure brings the country's tally for the pandemic to more than 2.1 million coronavirus cases, with 57,138 57,138 deaths. But the real number is believed to be much higher due to low testing rates for the deadly respiratory illness. Indonesia's COVID-19 case rates have soared in recent weeks after millions traveled at the end of Muslim fasting month of Ramadan in May, and as authorities identify the presence of highly infectious newer virus strains. Fears are growing that Indonesia's tricky health system could collapse, and there are reports of some overflowing hospitals being forced to turn patients away. Hospitals in the hard-hit capital Jakarta as well as West and Central Java have been flooded with patients, including those infected with the highly transmissible Delta variant, first identified in India.
And here are images of a mobile coronavirus vaccine truck from the newly vaccinated locals as Malaysia ramps up its inoculations to halt the spread of COVID-19. Let's take a look.
Dekat dengan rumah lah. Senang sikit, cepat. Ada ikut peraturan. Bagus jugalah dekat sini. Tak payah kita pergi jauh-jauh kan?
Masih rasa happy tak?
Lega lah, lega sangat. Seronok lah, tak ada nak pergi jauh-jauh, siapa nak hantar kan. Seronok sangat, terima kasih banyak kepada yang ni lah, semua tim-tim ni lah.
Okey, cuma
Government drive. The trucks are part of a government drive to administer doses across the capital, parking at available urban spaces near residential areas and housing projects in Kuala Lumpur. More than 5.8 million doses have been handed out across Malaysia. Since vaccinations began in the Southeast Asian country in February, Malaysia has been under a strict lockdown since early June, with the government closing many businesses and limiting people's movements to a 10-kilometer radius to curb the virus. It currently sees a daily average of more than 5,000 new cases, as well as dozens of deaths every day.
Barefoot Thai prisoners rolled up their sleeves to get Sinopharm coronavirus jobs into tattooed arms as the kingdom seeks to tackle a mass infection outbreak in its overcrowded jails. Authorities have been trying to contain a recent virus surge in the penal system, where some inmates have less space to sleep than the inside of a coffin.
ผู้ต้องขังทุกคนจะต้องสวอปก่อนแล้ว PCR ก่อนแล้วก่อนที่จะมาฉีดวัคซีนครับเรือนจำแห่งนี้เป็นเรือนจำสีขาวซึ่งยังไม่มีผู้ใดใน 6,272 คนติดเชื้อจะเป็นกลุ่มเปราะบางถูกไหมครับกลุ่มสูงอายุกลุ่มโรคติดต่อนะครับของกรมราชทัณฑ์เนี่ยได้รับวัคซีนมา 300,000 แต่จะทยอยฉีดไปยังเรือนจำที่สำคัญก่อนในเรือนจำนั้นเนี่ยเป็นเรื่องยากลำบากที่เราจะป้องกันโรคเหล่านี้ได้
There have been more than 35,000 positive cases inside prisons, and inmates have been encouraged to wear masks, even when they sleep at night. The government has begun rolling out an initial batch of 300,000 Sinopharm doses across the kingdom's jails. Inmates at Chunburir Central Prison, 2 hours southwest of Bangkok, lined up Friday morning to receive their jobs. Every prisoner had to undergo a swab test before their vaccination, and priority was given to elderly inmates and those suffering underlying medical conditions that made them more vulnerable to severe virus cases. Thailand has around 311,000 prisoners, according to International Federation for Human Rights figures from earlier this year, more than 2.5 times of system's official capacity. 4 out of 5 prisoners are serving time for drug charges because of harsh anti-narcotics laws that can see offenders jailed for a decade for possessing just a few methamphetamine pills.
Meanwhile, Thailand from today reimposed COVID-19 restrictions on restaurants, construction sites, and gatherings in the capital Bangkok and its suburbs as it tries to contain a wave of coronavirus cases. After a year of relative success in keeping infection rates low, Thailand's latest wave kicked off in April when a cluster was found in upscale Bangkok clubs typically frequented by the elite. Since then, more have been discovered in its overcrowded prison system, as well as among migrant workers who toil in its construction and service industries. The government said in an order published on Saturday that new restrictions will begin today and last for a month. And they include closing construction sites in Bangkok and surrounding areas, banning workers from leaving, prohibiting eat-in customers at restaurants, and restricting gatherings to a maximum of 20 people. Checkpoints will be set up in Thailand's southernmost provinces of Narathiwat, Pattani, Yala, and Songkhla. Travelers must carry a letter of intent to leave or enter. The new restrictions come ahead of the July 1 launch of a quarantine-free model for vaccinated tourists in the popular holiday destination of Phuket. The so-called Phuket Sandbox has been touted as a way to resuscitate Thailand's crucial tourism industry and related sectors such as service, restaurants, and transport.
The Delta Plus variant that has spread from India to 11 countries with 200 cases is not yet a variant of concern, a health expert said on a Saturday. In a televised public briefing of Laging Handa, Dr. Eva Maria de La Paz, Executive Director of the University of the Philippines, Manila, National Institute of Health, said the World Health Organization, or WHO, in its latest epidemiological report has not identified the Delta Plus variant, an emerging form of the Delta variant of the novel coronavirus as a VOC.
Ang po ito na importante at itong K417N na nasa Delta Plus variant ay maari pong makakontribute sa immune escape. Sa huli pong COVID-19 weekly epidemiologic report ng WHO, ang Delta variant plus ay hindi pa po variant of concern. Pero ang Delta variant ay variant of concern na po. Ang variant of concern po, para lang po maliwanagan ng ating mga tagapakinig, ay isang pamilya po ng coronavirus na may taglay na mga mutation na nagpapabago ng anyo nito at nagdudulot ng mga banta sa kalusugang pampubliko tulad ng mas madali siya makahawa o di kaya po nakakapagdulot po siya ng mas malubhang sakit o di kaya pwede niya pong iwasan ang mga epekto ng mga gamot o bakuna panlaban dito. So, ang mga tao pong may bakuna na sa COVID-19 na Delta variant po ang kanilang virus, mas maliit po ang pagkakataong ma-ospital kumpara po dun sa mga hindi na bakunahan. So, importante pa rin po, Yusek Rocky, ang pagpapabakuna.
De La Paz urged the public to do their part in keeping the number of infections low, since every case is an opportunity for the virus to mutate and become more transmissible, like what happened in India. He also assured the public that the Philippine Genome Center has the capability to sequence any coronavirus variant, as it has the government's full support even before the pandemic started.
Meanwhile, the World Health Organization Director General Dr. Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus expressed concern about the rapid spread of the Delta variant of COVID-19, while access to the vaccines remain extremely unbalanced around the world. Take a look.
I know that globally there is currently a lot of concern about the Delta variant, and WHO is concerned about it too. Delta is the most transmissible of the variants identified so far, has been identified in at least 85 countries, and is spreading rapidly among unvaccinated populations. As some countries ease public health and social measures, we're starting to see increases in transmission around the world. More cases means more hospitalizations, further stretching health workers and health systems, which increases the risk of death. As we have said, new variants are expected and will continue to be reported. That's what viruses do. They evolve. But we can prevent the emergence of variants by preventing transmission. The tailored and consistent use of public health and social measures in combination with equitable vaccination. This is why WHO has been saying for at least a year that vaccines must be distributed equitably.
Now, cases are on the rise in Russia, Australia, Israel, and across parts of Africa, in part due to Delta. Other countries fear they could be next. The Delta variant of SARS-CoV-2 was first detected in India, where it began circulating around April. In Europe, Delta initially gained a foothold in Britain, where it quickly outpaced the previous variant of concern, the Alpha, and now comprises 95% of all sequence cases in England. Delta is thought to be some 40 to 60% more contagious than Alpha, which itself is more contagious than the strain responsible for the first wave of COVID-19. Meanwhile, the European Center for Disease Control has estimated that the Delta could account for 70% of new infections in the EU by the beginning of August and 90% of the end by the end of that month.
Two more variants of the SARS-CoV-2, which causes the COVID-19, were detected locally in Negros Oriental. In a virtual presser late Thursday, Assistant Provincial Health Officer Dr. Leland Estacion, COVID-19 Incident Commander of the Province Interagency Task Force for the Management of Emerging Infectious Diseases, said the variants are the P3 or Theta, a local mutation first reported in Central Visayas, and the Alpha, formerly known as the B117, that was first detected in the United Kingdom. Quote, "These are local cases, not imported. By returning overseas Filipinos or overseas Filipino workers who came back to the province in previous months, and were reported to have tested for COVID-19 mutant strains, but had already recovered prior to arriving here," Estacion said in mixed English and Cebuano. The Theta variant case is in this capital city and has recovered, while the Alpha variant patient is in Tanjay City, about an hour's drive north of here, she said. Contact tracing is now underway to locate persons up to the third generation who were exposed to this patient. Asked why these variant cases, which health authorities say can spread faster and are more infectious, managed to enter the province without being detected, Estacion admitted they need to review and tighten security and border control measures after these were apparently breached. This is the first time Negros Oriental has reported an Alpha variant case, while Theta cases were pegged at 5. Regardless of whether there are variants or not, Estacion said people should still be mindful in strictly adhering to the basic health protocols, considering that the surge of cases has already plateaued in recent days.
And the news continues here on ASEAN in Focus. Crystal and I will be back right after this break.
Factual.
We have to defeat the virus everywhere.
Timely information. Balanced, not only in the country, but also abroad.
I'm certain of one thing.
Interviews that people need to know. Watch Aguila Pilipinas. A 1-hour newscast of reports coming from regional hubs in Luzon, Visayas, and Mindanao. Know the important updates in Asia in ASEAN in Focus. Track the latest stories in the provinces in Aguila Provincia.
Sa mga taga-Iloilo at Antique.
Tune into Mata ng Agila, the evening primetime news program of Net25. Balanced and objective, Mata ng Agila covers national and international issues, tackles news on business, health, science and technology, entertainment, sports and human interest features, and current events. And Eagle News International delivers the latest global reports, impartial, accessible, and up-to-date. It brings to fore EBC's rich international scope and access to valuable information streams.
Well, thank you to thank our health outdoor.
Catch these programs on Net25. You can also watch our news programs through eaglenews.ph and Eagle News Facebook page and YouTube channel.
Events happen around us all the time, in our community, in our country, around the world. Events that affect people, move communities, or simply inspire us. Interesting events that people need to know. In these interesting times, we continue to be a competent partner in delivering news about these events. Fast, accurate, balanced. Eagle News, because we live in interesting times.
Surrender, give up your weapons, and the government will support you. President Duterte made that offer anew to the NPA rebels, assuring them of free housing, financial and food assistance in a speech delivered during the launch and oath-taking ceremony of officers of the Global Coalition of Lingkod Bayan Advocacy Support Groups and Force Multipliers at the Philippine National Police Multi-Purpose Center in Camp Crame, Quezon City on Friday. Let's take a listen.
Ang deal ko sa surrender is, if you surrender, I will automatically give you a place to stay. Then I will send you to TESDA under Secretary La Peña. You learn the basics of whatever vocational study that you can be master. And after that, well, for the time being, I will pay you and I will support you with the food sustenance. Yun ang deal ko sa kanila. But surrender every month. Drop the arms.
Duterte also said that the CPP's Politburo, or the policymakers, are earning billions of pesos at the expense of the poor NPA bandits. He said NPA guerrillas must be enlightened by the sad story of the CPP. Again, let's listen in.
They collect taxes, the NPAs, everywhere and anywhere. Sigurado ako, cement factories in the far-flung areas of the country, Davao, lahat agricultural companies, nagbabayad sa kanila yan. You know, people must realize that the Communist Party of the Philippines has a broad taxation, and they collect taxes almost from the lowly farmer to the conglomerates. And we estimate, the intelligence community, that they are earning, the Politburo earning billions of pesos, and yet their soldiers down on the ground are dying sometimes without eating a meal for 2 days. Yan ang hindi alam ng insurgents. Ang hindi alam ng sundalo ng komunista. Yan ang hindi alam ng mga civilian na ganun talaga ang palakad. While the Politburo's families and members and their children are all abroad enjoying the fat of the land from the Communist Party of the Philippines. Mga anak nila are studying in Europe, London. Some of them are traveling. The latest intelligence report was that a group of them went to Turkey upon invitation of the government, I think, of Turkey, and some of them have opted to study there. Yan ang hindi alam ng pobreng kawal ng sundalo. And this must be brought to light para malaman nila ang totoo.
Now, the CPP-NPA is listed as a terrorist group by the Philippines, United States, European Union, United Kingdom, Australia, Canada, and New Zealand. On May 29, 2018, the Department of National Defense issued the implementing rules and regulations directing Task Force Balik Loob to enforce the Enhanced Comprehensive Local Integration Program, or ECLIP, the government's program for former rebels. Under ECLIP, former rebels will receive 15,000 pesos worth of immediate assistance, 21,000 pesos to defray the subsistence or meal cost, support to relocate and secure their family, 50,000 pesos livelihood assistance, and other benefits like temporary shelter, Philippine Health Insurance Corporation, or PhilHealth enrollment, modified conditional cash transfer, and medical, legal, and livelihood assistance.
Going back to Thailand, hundreds of pro-democracy protesters rallied in Bangkok Thursday to call for the government's resignation, defying warnings from authorities about the kingdom's soaring coronavirus cases. The marches came on the 89th anniversary of the Siamese Revolution, the uprising that transformed Thailand from an absolute to a constitutional monarchy. Bangkok was rocked by near daily protests against Prime Minister Prayut Chan-o-cha's government in the second half of 2020. But the pro-democracy movement has lost steam after virus outbreaks and the jailing of student leaders. Authorities have clamped down on public gatherings as the kingdom grapples with the third wave of infection, with its daily case number hovering around the 3,000 mark. Despite police warnings, hundreds gathered at Democracy Monument, a major intersection in Bangkok, and marched in the direction of Parliament House to protest against the rule of Prayut, the former military chief who came to power in a 2014 coup. The Thai pro-democracy movement sent shockwaves through the country's establishment last year, particularly the most controversial demand, a call to reform how the monarchy operates. About 150 people have been charged since the movement started, with the key leaders hit with multiple counts under Thailand's staff's royal defamation law. Many of them were released on bail under conditions that include not protesting. The kingdom has recorded more than 232,600 COVID cases to date and 1,775 deaths.
To Myanmar now, where the southern Longlan Township sees protesters from several small villages stage marches against the junta. Now, this time with children forming the vanguard of the strides. Protesters chanting, holding up roses, and flashing the three-fingered salute that has come to symbolize the country's pro-democracy movement. Take a look. Now, the mass uprising against the military putsch that toppled the government of Aung San Suu Kyi has been met with a brutal crackdown that has killed more than 870 civilians, according to a local monitoring group. As well as the rise of local self-defense forces, analysts believe hundreds of anti-coup protesters from Myanmar's towns and cities have trekked into insurgent-held areas to receive military training. Myanmar's junta chief on Tuesday, meanwhile, thanked Russia, a major weapons supplier to the troubled Southeast Asian country, for strengthening the army, which seized power in a coup earlier this year. And Russia has backed its ally and warned the West against sanctioning the junta. However, the EU added 8 officials from Myanmar's junta and 3 firms linked to the military to its sanctions blacklist. Now, those targeted with asset freezes and visa bans included the Interior, Security, Finance, Natural Resources, and Transport ministers, according to listings published in the EU's official journal. The U.S. and Britain have also targeted key officials and enterprises in the country, but so far the junta has shrugged off Western pressure.
Still in Myanmar, authorities torched over $500 million worth of narcotics across the country Saturday, sending opium, heroin, and methamphetamine up in smoke as experts warn smugglers have adapted to COVID-19 travel restrictions and are back in business. Stacks of green-brown cannabis were stacked high at the compound in the commercial capital Yangon, alongside bin liner-sized bags of red-pink pills, marking one of Myanmar's offerings for the annual World Drug Day burning. Slabs of heroin, bags of ketamine and tramadol and ice were also laid out on the fire. Stashes were also burned at ceremonies held in Mandalay and Taungji in Shan State. Myanmar's anti-drugs police department said a total of just under $668 million of narcotics, including 224 million meth tablets, were torched in the 3 cities. Despite COVID-19 travel restrictions, there has been an overall sustained expansion of the methamphetamine market in East and Southeast Asia, the UN said earlier this month. Myanmar's troubled Shan State remains the main source of the drug, it added, which is often smuggled onto the wealthier overseas markets such as Australia and Japan in its more potent crystallized form.
Meanwhile, violence in post-coup Myanmar has escalated as anti-junta self-defense forces step up to take on the military, according to a report today, warning of an enormous human cost if the regime uses its full power in subsequent crackdowns. Now, in some areas, locals, often using hunting rifles or weapons manufactured at makeshift jungle factories, have formed defense forces to fight back. In response, the military has used helicopters and artillery, including against groups in northwestern Chin State and along the eastern border with Thailand. The International Crisis Group said Monday, faced with armed insurrection, the Tatmadaw, the Myanmar military, can be expected to unleash its military might against civilians. Clashes have taken place in areas that have not seen conflict for decades, forcing humanitarian agencies into a race to set up new operations and supply lines, according to the ICG. An estimated 230,000 people have already been displaced by fighting and insecurity so far, according to the United Nations last week. The self-defense groups add to the volatile mix in the poor Southeast Asian country, where more than 20 ethnic rebel groups were already in various stages of the conflict with the state before the coup. Clashes involving civilian militias and the military have largely been restricted to rural areas, but last week at least 6 people died in a gun battle between security forces and a self-defense group in the country's second city of Mandalay.
Philippine National Police or PNP Chief General Guillermo Eleazar on Sunday welcomed the concern raised by the Commission of Human Rights, or CHR, over President Rodrigo Roa Duterte's suggestion to arm the police partners in fighting crimes and terrorism. On June 25, the PNP launched a global coalition of Lingkod Bayan advocacy support groups and force multipliers that aims to build a strong collaborative partnership with the community in support of the ongoing campaign against criminality and terrorism. In his message, President Duterte declared he was open to issuing firearms to a new group of volunteers to help government forces enforce the law.
You want to participate in the prosecution of the crime, you can have a gun, and if you are qualified, I will ask the police to give you the license. But please try to observe the law. If you want, you invite me once again when you are ready, and I will lecture to you the law on arrest, search, and seizure. As a policeman, yan lang ang ano. I was teaching criminal law, criminal procedure, criminal evidence during my prosecution days.
Quote, "We understand the concern of the officials of the Commission on Human Rights, but we assure them that the President's suggestion is to encourage voluntarism and definitely not vigilantism," Eleazar said in a statement. Eleazar also said Duterte's recommendation aims to protect the civilian volunteers against the criminal elements, including members of the New People's Army, the armed wing of the Communist Party of the Philippines that is listed as terrorist organization by the United States, the European Union, the United Kingdom, Australia, Canada, New Zealand, and the Philippines.
In other news, a container ship left adrift in the Indian Ocean after an engine room fire was being towed to Singapore on Saturday, according to the Sri Lanka's Navy. The Indian Coast Guard helped extinguish the blaze after it erupted aboard the MV MSC Messina on Friday, about 475 nautical miles from Port Blair in India's Andaman and Nicobar Islands. One of the crew members, 28 crew members, remains missing after the fire. Sri Lanka's Navy helped coordinate communications with the stricken ship and other vessels in the area. The Liberian-registered MSC Messina left a Colombo port on Wednesday en route to Singapore and reported the fire halfway to the Malacca Strait. It is the second ship to catch fire in the Indian Ocean in recent weeks, with the Singapore-registered MV Express Pearl going up in flames and sinking off Colombo earlier this month. Now, the MV Express Pearl was carrying large quantities of chemicals and plastics, and the accident has caused extensive damage to Sri Lanka's marine ecosystem.
Stay tuned as ASEAN in Focus will be right back.
Innovation, digital disruption, globalization. Startups, micro, small, and medium enterprises, as well as large corporations, all face interesting challenges in the market today. Peek into the world of exciting opportunities and partnerships to drive growth with the latest business news and information. We are open for business. Your weekly dose of entrepreneurial inspiration to update you on the latest developments in the world of business. Get up close and personal with CEOs and thought leaders to help you discover valuable insights Sharpen your instincts for smart decision-making with the latest markets and economic trends, disruptive ideas, global innovation, social entrepreneurship, and other leading-edge business ideas. Join the conversations to create a more vibrant environment for entrepreneurship. Catch Open for Business, from vision to action.
Broadcast journalist Wayne De La Fuente returns on Philippine television and radio to deliver top stories and engage with the country's policymakers, shapers, and movers. Tatalakayin ang mga pangunahing balita live sa teleradyo ng Net25 at Radyo Aguila DCEC 1062. Kasama si Wayne De La Fuente sa Balitalakayan.
Ako si Wayne De La Fuente at itong Balitalakayan, we live in interesting times.
Samahan sina Wedge Kujamat,
itong balitang panggising sa ulo ng mga balita.
Apple David,
Sa 60 katao ang isinugod sa ospital.
Phoebe Publico,
Economic sabotage ang mga tiwaling negosyante.
at Cristel Fesalbon.
Pagpresyo ng gulay, makakausap natin
Para ihatid sa inyo ang mga kaganapan at pangyayari sa bansa at sa iba't ibang panig ng mundo. Mga napapanahong isyu ng bayan. May balitang sports, entertainment at iba pang kaalaman. Simula Lunes hanggang Biyernes, alas 5 ng umaga sa paborito nyong morning show, Pambansang Almusal, dito sa Net25.
Pambansang Almusal.
Welcome back to the program. Wildlife officials carry away the carcasses of turtles washed ashore near Sri Lanka's capital, Colombo, with their deaths linked to a recent fire on board a container ship carrying hundreds of tons of chemicals and plastics. Damage to Sri Lanka's marine environment from a sinking chemical ship is worse than feared. Officials said Friday as more dead turtles, dolphins, and whales washed up on the island's beaches. As of Thursday, 130 marine animals have been found dead on the Indian Ocean's beaches since the MV Express caught fire last month, before partially sinking off the coast after 2 weeks ablaze. Sri Lanka's government believes they were killed by the hundreds of tons of chemicals and plastics leaking from the ship. At least 6 turtle carcasses washed up along the western coast on Thursday alone, a wildlife official told AFP. He said they had also received the first report of a shoal of 3 fish dying at Tikadua, a southern tourist resort area known for its rich coral reefs. The officials said so far they have collected the carcasses of 115 turtles, 15 dolphins, and 5 whales. The Singapore registered ship was known to be carrying 81 containers of hazardous chemicals, including 25 tons of nitric acid, when it caught fire. Around 1,200 tons of tiny plastic pellets and other debris that blanket bleaches have been scooped up and are being stored in 45 shipping containers. Sri Lanka is seeking $40 million in damages from the Singapore's ship operators, Express Feeders.
In other news, separatist rebels were holding 4 civilians hostage in the jungles of Indonesia's breakaway Papua New Guinea region after they killed several construction workers in an ambush, according to authorities on Friday. Now, tensions have been mounting between Indonesian security forces and guerrillas fighting a decades-long insurgency to win independence from the Southeast Asian nation. Authorities said some 30 rebels opened fire on Thursday on a group of Indonesian construction workers building new homes in the province's central Yahukimo Regency, killing at least 4 people. Rescue operations to find another 4 people being held by the rebels are underway, according to the military and Papua Police spokesman Ahmad Mustafa Kamal. Tensions in the conflict-racked region have soared in recent months, punctuated by deadly clashes after rebels killed Indonesia's top intelligence chief in Papua in April. Jakarta responded by formally designating Papuan separatists as terrorists, sparking fears it could open the door to more violence and rights abuses. The latest incident comes more than 2 years after Papuan rebels killed 17 construction workers at a remote jungle camp. The massacre marked an escalation in decades of mostly sporadic skirmishes between poorly armed and disorganized guerrillas and an Indonesian military long accused of gross human rights abuses against civilians. A former Dutch colony, mineral-rich Papua, declared itself independent in 1961, but neighboring Jakarta took control 2 years later, promising an independence referendum. The subsequent vote in favor of staying part of Indonesia was widely considered a sham. Papua's Melanesian population shares few cultural connections with the rest of Indonesia.
Demand for office spaces is expected to remain stable and resilient, with the business process outsourcing or BPO sector leading the growth in the Philippines amid global uncertainty brought by the coronavirus disease. According to Jones Lang LaSalle or JLL, the information technology business process management industry may continue to spearhead demand for office spaces, and this potential new trend of setting up satellite offices would be a strategic fit for the industry, considering the significant number of employees in the sector. The global real estate services firm said in an office market study of Metro Manila and Metro Cebu prepared for Philinvest Land Incorporation. JLL's findings are positive for FLI subsidiary Cyberzone Properties Incorporation or CPI, which continues to derive steady cash flow from its office leasing business due to the resilience of the BPO sector, even amidst the COVID-19 global pandemic.
Meanwhile, Haiti, Malta, and the Philippines and South Sudan were placed Friday on a gray list of countries under increased monitoring to counter money laundering and terrorist financing. Take a look. Now, the Financial Action Task Force, an international organization that coordinates global efforts to crack down on money laundering and terrorism financing, said nations on the list are working with it to correct deficiencies in their financial systems. The additions bring to 22 the number of countries currently under increased monitoring by the Intergovernmental Watchdog, which was created in 1989. Malta becomes the only EU nation on the list, dominated by African and Central American and Caribbean countries. Malta's Prime Minister Robert Abela earlier this week criticized the FATF's decision, but he pledged to improve oversight on financial crimes. Inclusion on the list can have negative consequences, making it more difficult to attract foreign investment. Nations are urged to take steps to apply measures to protect the international financial system from risks from blacklist countries.
The Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas or BSP is seeing more investment inflows from foreign banks for digital banking in the country. Governor Benjamin Jokno said in a press conference Friday that since the start of the country's digital banking framework in December 2020, the central bank anticipates growth in foreign investment in digital banking. BSP Policy and Specialized Supervision Subsector Managing Director Lynn Javier said that the central bank has received queries and interest from foreign banks in Europe and Asian regions. At least 3 banks have completed phase 1 of the licensing process for digital banks, Javier said, adding that the BSP will continue to evaluate other applications upon submission of complete documents. Moreover, Jokno said aside from opportunities in digital banking in the Philippines, foreign banks have huge prospects in partnering with the private sector and promoting investments in infrastructure and sustainable finance.
In other news, the Norwegian and Malaysian telecoms groups Telenor and Axiata said that they would merge their Malaysian operations into a group worth around $12 billion. Take a look. Celcom, which is owned by Axiata, and Digi, owned by Telenor, would form a company whose name was not immediately revealed and in which each parent group would hold a stake of 33.1%, according to a statement. The remaining shares are to be listed on the Kuala Lumpur Stock Exchange. Excluding savings to be made through the merger, the new company is estimated to have a market capitalization of close to 50 billion ringgit, or $12 billion according to the statement. It's expected to serve 19 million clients and make a net annual profit of 1.9 billion ringgit, or on 12.4 billion in sales.
A critically endangered giant barking deer has been spotted in Cambodia for the first time, in a boost for the country's wildlife preservation efforts, officials said Friday. The giant muntjac, known for its long antlers, was captured on a hidden camera in April in northeast Cambodia's Virachai National Park in Ratanakiri Province, Environment Ministry spokesman Net Yaktra said. But the discovery was only made recently after Cambodian authorities retrieved the camera and trolled through months of footage from the forest, which has long been a site of illegal logging. The species was first found in forests in neighboring Vietnam and Laos in 1994. It is on the red list of the International Union for Conservation of Nature as critically endangered. Illegal logging remains a major environmental hazard in Cambodia, with vast tracts of forest under threat since the country's civil war ended in 1998.
In another animal news, Cambodian authorities confiscated a pet lion after it was defanged and declawed. The defanged and declawed animal was seen in TikTok videos in Phnom Penh Villa. Take a look. Now, Environment Ministry spokesman Net Piaktra said the 18-month-old male weighing 70 kilograms or 154 pounds had been imported from overseas by the owner, according to a Chinese national, to be raised in his home. Now, Wildlife Alliance, an animal rescue NGO that aided in the raid, wrote in a Facebook post that the conditions of a private residence was inappropriate for this wild animal. And the owner had shared a photo of the lion sitting in a driveway as a dog played nearby. There was also a video of it as a young cub being sprayed down with a hose. Now, the big cat was shown in photos released on Sunday by the Environment Ministry, lounging with a small dog as authorities prepped a crate to move it to the Nom Tamau Wildlife Rescue Center in the outskirts of the capital. Now, this confiscation comes a day after a Twitter user posted an aerial shot of the creature roaming around a garden in the upscale Bong Keng Kang district of Phnom Penh. And thank you, Crystal, for keeping me company today.
No worries, Alma. It's always been a pleasure. And that's the latest news in the ASEAN region. Thank you for joining us today here in ASEAN in Focus. This is Crystal Ann Ballesteros from your Cambodia Bureau, and we'll live in interesting times.
And we'll see you back tomorrow. I'm Alma Angeles. We live in interesting times.
Mapupuno ng saya, impormasyon at inspirasyon ang hapon mo sa Afternoon Power. Handog sa inyo ng Net25. Sasabay sa inyong tanghalian ang inyong Happy Time Barkada at 12 noon. Alamin ang mga pangyayari sa ASEAN nations, ASEAN in Focus at 2 p.m. Ang inyong paboritong awit komentaryo kasama si Leo Obligar sa Piskante ng Bayan. At mga balita sa iba't ibang panig ng bansa, hatid sa atin sa Aguila Probinsya. Siksik ang hapon mo mula Lunes hanggang Biyernes, ang inyong Afternoon Power sa Net 25.
Tawagin na natin ang pinakagwapo, napakagwapo, ladies and gentlemen. Let us all welcome Victor Wood!
Nagustuhan nila Derek at Sir Orly yung performance nyo. Kaya sa next episode, mag-partner na kayo.
Record ka ang sarili mong album. Wala. Hindi papatok, hindi